Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to the Booms and Bust Show. My name is Jonathan Davis. We have a packed programme today. Today, Monday, the 28th of January, 2019. I'd like to point out that if you want to email me, please do so. I'd love to have a chat with you. Contact me at jd@theboomsandbustsshow.com. Tweet me at boomsbustshow. Do please retweet what I'm sending out there. Let other people know what you know. Why keep it to yourself? We need to tell as many people as possible about free market capitalism. People are running into a tunnel out of which they'll never get if we don't bring back capitalism. And incidentally, probably this week, I'll be putting out the next Booms and Busts report. If you're not a free subscriber, just send your full name and email to the address I said above. I assure you, you'll never be junk mailed, but there's a lot of stuff in there that if you are an investor for your pension, for your long term, then you really ought to be hearing what I'm saying here and reading what I say there. This show is about free markets and capitalism, and I show you what socialism is. And I'm about to show you in gruesome detail what socialism is. But before I do that, I want to say that as well as free markets, we also talk about investing. It's the Booms and Busts show. I'm going to try and give you some great ideas for your long-term investing. Today is the 28th of January. The 27th of January is Holocaust Memorial Day, which is the day in 1945 that Auschwitz was liberated. Auschwitz-Birkenau was the largest Nazi death camp. We remember the 6 million Jews murdered by the National Socialists and all victims of Nazi persecution, including Roma, Gypsies, homosexuals, and the disabled. The Holocaust threatened the fabric of civilization, and the world said, "Never again." But genocides have continued to take place across the world. Cambodia 75 to 79, Rwanda 94, Bosnia 95, Darfur since 2003. Always socialism. Always socialism. As the Holocaust Memorial Trust say, genocide doesn't just happen. It starts with divisive language and people targeted because of their beliefs. We cannot be complacent. We must challenge prejudice and lies everywhere. Never, listener, never ever forget what politicians will do if we give them enough power. 6 million Jews, 10 million Soviets, including more Jews. Non-Jewish Poles, 1.8 million. Serbians, 310,000. The disabled, 250,000. Romanis, 220,000. Homosexuals and criminals, over 70,000. Murdered by the National Socialists. A CNN poll on anti-Semitism in Europe say that 5% have never heard of the Holocaust. I'll let that sink in. 18% blame anti-Semitism on, you guessed it, the Jews. 28% of CNN respondees say Jews have too much influence. 28% blame anti-Semitism on Israel, the only democracy between India and Europe. 32% say Jews use the Holocaust to gain personal goals. And 46% of CNN responders say Israel has no right to exist. Anyone who tells me that the Nazis were not socialists on Twitter get told they're being muted for being idiots and should grow up. If in person, I tell them you are an absolute idiot and I walk away. Years after the concentration camps had been going and doing the terrible, terrible things that they were doing, the camps weren't doing it, the Nazis were doing it in the camps. Years after, in 1938, Adolf Hitler was Time magazine's Man of the Year. And the following year, before the Second World War broke out, the Swedish Nobel Committee nominated Adolf Hitler for the Peace Prize. Ireland has just passed an anti-Semitic bill banning Jewish-made goods from Judea and Samaria. Ireland, who is doing its best to stop Brexit. Ireland. Total of 2018 condemnations adopted at the UN General Assembly. Israel, 21. Each of Iran, Syria, North Korea, Russia, Myanmar and US, 1. 1 each. Against Iran, North Korea and Myanmar. 1. Against Algeria, China, Hamas, Iraq, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Turkey, Venezuela, Zimbabwe, 0. How does Venezuela or China have none? China has more than 1 million Muslims locked away in internment camps. What about Hamas? They are literally a UN-stated terrorist organization. The UN Human Rights Council members today include Afghanistan, Burundi, China, Cuba, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Iraq, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela. I'll repeat that. They are the members of the United Nations Human Rights Council. British news. Never forget, listener. Never forget. An African practice of ironing a girl's chest with a hot stone to delay breast formation is spreading in the United Kingdom. Community workers in, get this, London, Yorkshire, Essex and the West Midlands have told a national newspaper of cases in which pre-teen girls from the diaspora of several African countries are subjected to the painful and abusive practice. Margaret Nyudzewera, head of the diaspora group the Came Women and Girls Development Organisation, estimated that at least 1,000 girls in the UK had been subjected to this torture. Not a single prosecution. Muslim mothers have raised concerns about LGBT teaching in schools, and local councillors are supporting the actions. If a non-Muslim family raised concerns about LGBT teaching in schools, they would quite likely hear from the police. But this is a Muslim, so must be listened to. As I read, the brain of the left will explode when Islam meets LGBT. Now, the guy who's made this quote obviously must be an absolute fascist and a disgusting individual who nobody loves, everybody hates. Quote, "There are too many migrants at the moment. Europe, Germany in particular, cannot become an Arab country. Germany is Germany. From a moral standpoint, refugees should only be accommodated temporarily." The Dalai Lama. Even he gets it. Here's a tweet from Humberside Police on the 25th of January. No doubt a story that many of you will be aware of. "We received reports of a number of transphobic comments being posted on social media. We take all reports of hate-related incidents seriously. We will always investigate to determine if a hate crime or incident has been committed and will take proportionate action." Now here's a report in the Yorkshire Post of the 17th of July 2018. The headline: "1 in 5 violent crimes were not recorded properly by Humberside Police Force, a Watchdogs inspector found." Humberside Police is estimated to have failed to record more than 14,000 crimes each year, the equivalent of 14% of all crime reported to the force. The figure is even higher for violent crime, with an estimated 20% not recorded. The issue was exposed in a report published on the 17th of July 2018 by Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, which gave the Humberside Force a grade of, quote, "requires improvement," unquote, based on the way it recorded reported crime between the 6th of June and December the 6th, 2017. And if you go looking on Twitter, you'll actually see the chap who was phoned by the Humberside policeman, who told him that he's going to check his thinking. And he's done a series of posts on Twitter, and he says he will be contacting the Chief Constable. They need to check our thinking. And 1984 by Orwell was different. How? And North Korea is different. How? This is the United Kingdom in the year 2019. And it's happening now. January the 24th marked the anniversary of the death of Sir Winston Churchill, who died in 1965 at the age of 90. One of the greatest Brits ever to have lived. His grandson Nicholas Soames is an MP. He's a socialist, a one-nation Tory, as they say, And of course, he's an ardent Bremainer. He is a huge anti-democratic fascist. His grandfather is spinning in his grave. Here's an interesting one that the mainstream media is doing. Gerard Batten has been blackballed by the nation's media. The leader of UKIP is not allowed into the media to talk about Brexit. Are you kidding me? Nigel Farage is an egotistical twat of the highest order. Leavers of Britain tweeted on January the 16th an open statement to Facebook, who has removed access without good reason to Leavers of Britain's Facebook page. They believe this is a contrived effort to stop free speech and curtail discussion of the EU. It is unacceptable. You are right, Leavers of Britain. Nick Clegg has just bought himself a £5 million house close to his new workplace at Facebook in Southern California. They're made for each other. For the 11th weekend in a row, the Yellow Jackets protesters are marching across France and facing off against Macron's violent security forces. And just like week 10, the BBC News made no mention whatsoever on their website. I'm going to read you, admittedly, an anonymous statement which was posted online on the 3rd of December 2018 at 10 o'clock in the morning. I work at Media City, the BBC north of Manchester. I can absolutely confirm that the British media has been handed a D notice, brackets, legal gagging order to prevent reporting on inflammatory, quote unquote, incidents such as injured or killed protesters. Not allowed to even mention the word France or French on the main page of the BBC News website, brackets. They're against reporting on the Yellow Jackets for, quote, national security, unquote, reasons. It's not fully legally binding, but the Director General of the BBC has enforced the D notice. I believe it. So, the most expensive conference in the world at Davos in Switzerland has come to an end. The attendees are richer than ever. The Davos A-listers have added $175 billion in the last 10 years. Added. The legacy of the central bankers and the politicians of 10 years ago is that the number of billionaires has nearly doubled. We've also got the so-called populist voters and movements right across the world. We've got the AMLO in Mexico, the AFD in Germany, the Liga in Italy. We've got, of course, Trump in the US, UKIP in Great Britain, Bolsonaro in Brazil, the Social Democrats, the Swedish Democrats in Sweden, and the Front National in France. And the only chance we have to get freedom in the world is not the election in Mexico or even in Italy or even in Brazil. But the only chance that we have freedom in the world for the next generation is if we Brexit. I read that we got the new table announced by the World Economic Forum, which is what they call the Davos conference, the World Economic Forum, of maths and science education quality for last year. Right at the top is capitalist free market Singapore. Number 2 and 3 are free market Finland and Switzerland. 4 is Lebanon somehow. Netherlands, then Qatar, then Belgium, Estonia, Hong Kong. The US is at number 10. Slovenia, Denmark, UAE, Canada, Germany at number 15. UK nowhere to be seen. Let me tell you what Davos is in a nutshell. You had 1,500 private jets carrying egomaniacs that have profited immensely from a warped system that benefits them at the expense of the middle classes and the poor, who are preaching about climate change and reducing poverty. There's a guy called Ken Griffin who leads a financial company by the name of Citadel. He's worth $10 billion. It's just announced that he's recently spent nearly $500 million as he approaches retirement on 3 homes, 2 in the US and 1 in London. The one in London cost £118 million. He's also bought 2 paintings for $500 million. This guy was bailed out by the Federal Reserve in 2008. The Federal Reserve chairman at that time was Ben Bernanke. When Ben Bernanke retired from the Federal Reserve, one of his first jobs, and he's still there, was working for Citadel. So we wait again to see what treachery most parliamentarians will do to us. If Article 50 is extended, there will be no Brexit. If the withdrawal agreement, as amended by time limiting the Northern Ireland backstop, if that gets through, there will be no Brexit. And I am shocked to the core that Rees-Mogg, Johnson and the rest of the crowd in the European Reform Group, the ERG, that Rees-Mogg is the chairman of, they are saying if they get a time limit on the Northern Ireland backstop, even though practically everything else is in there that is the EU, they will say they'll vote for it. It seems to me that's exactly what's going to happen. There will be no Brexit. The banking cartel demands a one-world government within 2 generations. And by golly, they will get what they want. If somehow we can Brexit, then we can delay it for another couple of generations. Maybe. So May, of course, last week she had her weekly tea and scones with Her Majesty. Queen Elizabeth says at the end, look, you've messed this all up. And I have to get I'm a very busy lady, you know. Look, shall I have Philip drive you home through country roads? This interests me, and I want to pass it on to you. A chap called Leonardo Fibonacci, in the year 1202, in a book by the name of Liber Abaci. Liber Abaci. He introduced the Hindu-Arabic numerical system to Europe. What was it he introduced? He brought in the 9 Indian figures of 987654321, and he added the sign of 0, which the Arabs call Zephyr. And so we had, from 1202, the decimal system. Leonardo Fibonacci was an unworldly genius. He also gave us some fantastic algebra. He showed us about fractions that no one has ever done before. And get this, those fractions still are used in science and financial markets today. Google Fibonacci retracements from 700-800 years ago. This guy, absolutely amazing. And he's still remembered and actively used today. Peter Sweden tells us regularly what's going on in Sweden. He tells us that Sweden has the second most reported rapes in the world per capita. Half of all the reported rapes in Sweden are committed against children. 40,000 girls and women have been genitally mutilated. There was a 13% increase in child rape from 2017 to 2018. And Sweden has, so they say, the first feminist government. Hannah is a 12-year-old Swedish girl. She was raped. The attacker received a sentence of community service. Following the rape, that little girl has been assaulted, threatened, and hit by friends and relatives of the rapist. Reported rape cases in Sweden have increased 1/3 over the last 10 years. Import savages expect savage behaviour. Now I've got to talk about Venezuela. Some in Venezuela's National Guard took on the regime and failed. But what they did set in motion the downfall of the socialist fascists. The collapse of Venezuela's economy since 2013, when Nicolas Maduro became president, surpasses the plunge of Latin American nations during the 1980s crisis and the former Soviet Union countries in the 1990s. The GDP of Venezuela in 5 years has collapsed 55%. In 2001, Venezuela was the wealthiest country in South America. 18 years later, some 90% of Venezuelans are in abject poverty. This is without precedent. What's gone on in Venezuela is like this. Imagine a world where President Donald Trump filled the Supreme Court and other institutions with his political hacks. The elections come and the other side, the Democrats, win a resounding 2/3 majority in Congress. Trump gets the courts to declare Congress null and void. Trump then creates another Congress, fills it with his own supporters to pass laws. When there are street protests, he sends out the National Guard. More than 100 are killed by the security forces. Thousands arrested. Top leaders from the opposition are arrested or forced into exile. Many are tortured. Trump then heads for re-election. But his administration bars any opposition from running. The opposition boycotts the election. Trump holds it anyway and wins. No credible observers are allowed. Even the guy who set up the electoral voting system says there's fraud. Trump is sworn in as president again by the fake Congress. The real Congress says he's an illegitimate president. And according to law, they swear in the head of Congress as the legitimate president until new elections can be held. The interim president is recognized by many nations. Listener, in a nutshell, that's what has happened in Venezuela. The Venezuelan National Guard have been shooting at anti-Maduro protesters moments after Juan Guaido declared himself president. Trump's administration has turned over US bank accounts, etc., to Guaido. Remember, Venezuela has the world's largest oil reserves. At the last count, Venezuela has 300,000 million barrels of oil, compared to Saudi Arabia, which we know is huge, 266,000 million barrels. And for your reference, Canada, 170,000 million, Iran and Iraq, both 150,000 million barrels, Kuwait, UAE, about 100,000 million barrels, Russia, 80,000 million barrels. I don't know where the US is, which is curious because they're the biggest producer in the world. I don't know how many they've got. And yet Venezuela now produces only 1/12 of what Saudi Arabia produces. Always socialism, listener. Always socialism. I've seen videos of probably over 1 million on Caracas streets demonstrating. And the socialists in the West tell disgusting, atrocious lies that it's all the fault of the West. In the House of Commons today, for example, Chris Williamson, Marxist MP, he said, millions support Maduro. And? Isn't it ironic that there are hundreds of millions surviving in socialist regimes, campaigning to get out of socialism, and in the West, they're campaigning for socialism. The Bank of England has denied Maduro's request to bring back $1.2 billion of gold from the Bank of England vaults. 2 points. Is the gold actually there? Who knows? Second point. Watch out, other global socialist fascist dictators. Your time will come. Intervene openly in a foreign country's politics like Venezuela, and everyone in the West, well, most people in the West love you. Ignore the will of the people in a domestic democratic process, such as Brexit. Censor the mainstream media about a huge political protest movement, the Gilets jaunes. This is the rules-based order of the US and the UK. Okay, we're heading towards economics. Good technology. Today in market history, yesterday on the 27th of January 2010, the then Apple Chief Executive Officer Steve Jobs, may he rest in peace, he unveiled the iPad tablet computer during a presentation in San Francisco. The iPad became an important product for Apple, but of course has never matched and will never match the immense popularity of the iPhone. The only Apple devices that we have are 2 iPad minis, and there's no question they are built fantastically well. They are hugely expensive, but they are absolutely phenomenal electronic devices. No question. They are a million miles better than our Android tablets. And I dare say the iPhone is also magnificent, but I wouldn't buy it for the costs. Probably good tech. Amazon has now rolled out what they call Scout delivery robots. These are about the size of medium-sized suitcases on wheels, and they literally poodle around pavements and little roads, and they will bring you your hot pizza or a package, of course, from Amazon's distribution center. It started. We're going to see, I tell you, within 3, 4, 5 years, definitely, we are going to see thousands of these little robots tootling around all over the show in the United Kingdom. And all the delivery people that thought they were onto something sweet, earning whatever it was, 50 pence or £1 for each delivery, they're out of a job, they're out of income. There'll be no use for them whatsoever. And we know that there are many, many, probably tens of thousands of them. Even if they're part-time, that's it. They'll lose their income very soon. After that, of course, you'll find there's no need for taxi drivers because we'll all be getting automated driving Ubers, and that suggests that there'll be fewer even cars, because if it's cheap to get an Uber automated driving, why would you buy and own a depreciating asset? The answer is you wouldn't. Insidious technology. They've made a computer inside a contact lens which records a video of what you're watching. You can surf the web. You'll get facial and object recognition, and of course you'll take photos. Don't tell me they're not going to be spying on us from every single angle. So Amazon Echo isn't recording you? Quote, Amazon told the Associated Press that it would not release such recordings, quote, without a valid and binding legal demand properly served on us, unquote. A response that would appear to suggest that the recordings in question exist, unquote. I don't know how you pronounce it, but the phone manufacturer Xiaomi, Xiaomi, which I believe is Chinese, it's put out a short video on the social media of the world's first manufactured folding smartphone. In essence, it's a normal-sized phone, but it's a bit thicker, and when you unfold two flaps, one to the right from the back, one to the right and one to the left, and then turn it from horizontal to vertical, it automatically transforms itself into a mini tablet. It looks absolutely sensational, and it probably is. So I see that the founder and erstwhile, or maybe still is, I don't know, I don't think he is, chief executive of Starbucks, Schultz, can't remember his first name, who's of course a multi-billionaire, etc. He says that he is likely, which means he will, stand as an independent candidate in the 2020 US presidential election. See, the flaw in that plan, chief executive, Starbucks, is that he's likely to open too many campaign offices, and some will be even right across the street from one another. Listener, if you're not a regular listener of the Booms and Bust show and you think you would like to be, the easiest way to get the Booms and Bust podcast is to open up audioboom.com in your normal browser, click listen, then search, just type in Booms and it will come up Booms and Busts, and just click on it, listen and subscribe, and it will then automatically be sent to you to your listening device whenever a new show is published. You can also go on to Podcast Addict. Let's look at economics. So I've talked about the Davos crowd massively increasing their wealth. And that's the reason why we've got, I believe, socialists surging into our political scene. The genesis is, of course, the bank bailouts and the central bank actions of the last decade. From 2010 to 2015, the number of billionaires in the West went up 26%. The number of 100 millionaires that got up to $1 billion went up 61%. The number of 20 millionaires that went up to 100 million went up 64%. Those on middle class incomes, their incomes fell 1.5%. That's BCG data. Now, if you've ever wondered about those socio-economic groupings by when you were born, this is your guide. The silent generation were born between 1928 and 1945. The baby boomers, 1946 to 1964. I would have thought many listeners of this show are boomers. You're between 54 and 72. The Generation Xers are from 1965 to 1980. The millennials. I've never quite understood who the millennials are. I found out. I'm telling you. The millennials are those who were born between 1981 and 1996. So basically, they've just graduated and they're in their up to the mid-30s. And then finally, what they call the post-millennials, they don't have their own branding. They are those who are born from 1997 to the present. So I thought that would be of interest to you. Talking about interest. Interest rates determine everything. And when they are falling, it's largely because we are in falling inflation or deflation. When they're rising, it's largely because we're in inflation. Now, the 10-year US Treasury, in fact, global interest rates, have been rising for the last 2.5, 3 years. from the summer of 2016 to the late summer of 2018, the US 10-year went up from 1.4% to 3.2%. In the next few months, it fell sharply to 2.6%. We are now at 2.75%. There are many who say that the 10-year or the 30-year or the 5-year is still in a downtrend from the late summer last year. I'm not so sure. When I look at the chart, I see a series of higher high interest rates and a series of higher low interest rates. I see the 200-day moving average rising. I see the 50-day moving average above the 200-day. I see it still in an uptrend. And if we see the 10-year above 2.8%, to be on the safe side, 3%, you can pretty well guarantee that we are in a multi-year and possibly a multi-decade of rising interest rates. As I say, it's recently gone from 2.6 over 2 or 3 weeks to 2.75%. An amazing economic statistic. You want to see the craziness of Chinese debt, the debt-fueled expansion of the Chinese economy. I heard a socialist MP recently on one of the political programs saying, if you want to look at socialism working, look at China. Well, here is Chinese socialism in its ridiculousness. It's all fueled by debt. Between 2011 and 2013, China produced more cement than the United States did in the 20th century. It's all debt fueled. Look at stocks. Look at the daddy of them all, the S&P 500. It fell 20% from late September to late December, in fact, Christmas Eve. Since then, in the space of 4 weeks, the S&P is up 14%, i.e., back to prior support. Emerging markets bottomed in late October, and the emerging market fund that we use, the price is above the 200-day moving average, and the 50-day is very soon going to give us what we call a golden cross. The 50-day will move above the 200-day. Now, that doesn't mean that it's immediately going to jump. What it does, however, suggest is that medium term, the emerging markets fund is in a bull market, and it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. In 4 weeks, the S&P is up 14%. It has now had 4 weekly rises of at least 1.5% from 1950 to 2018. This has been 100% bullish for the S&P 6 to 12 months later. And indeed, whenever that has happened, it's been 80% massively bullish 12 months later. On the 26th of January, we heard from Jeff DeGraff, chartered market technician. He tells us that 60% of the 500 components achieved a 20-day high on Friday. This is a rare event that has only happened 18 times since 1957. This is, quote, extraordinarily bullish on a 6 to 12 month time frame. In other words, it's not just a handful of stocks which is going through the roof. It's a very wide breadth right across the market. So the S&P right now, as I speak, stands at 2635, having been up to 2670. Okay, so it's in a horizontal for the last week or so. Going back to my notes. So we have to watch roughly 2530 to 2580 on a small pullback. If it goes below 2500, then we're definitely going back to the 23s and probably the 22s. But if it goes up past 2820, 2850, it's only 200 points from where we are now, 2630. So what's that, 7%? Then I tell you, we're going to see all-time highs again, and it's a multi-year bull market. So, we'll see what happens. As far as I'm concerned, we're still in a bull market. What I can tell you is that S&P 500 profit margins continue to trend above their respective 26 and 2014 peaks. Global stocks. In the year 2007, they got to a massive peak at a level of, let's say, 2,900. They finally got back up above 2,900 as late as 2017 because they couldn't get above the 2007 high for what is that now? Not 18 years, for 10 years. At the end of 2018, it fell below the 2,900 level. And would you know that we are right now at 2,900? In other words, we are again back at the breakout level of the 2007 high. So there's no doubt, there's a question out there. Was 2017 a false breakup? Was 2018, late 2018, a false breakdown? Above 2,900, certainly above 3,000, we're in a multi-year bull market. Below 2,900 and certainly below 2,800, we're probably in a bear market. Gold. We've got the golden cross in gold. As I say, it doesn't mean that we're on our way now, but I've been bullish gold. I'm uber bullish gold. Ultra short term, yeah, we could yet see gold come back from 1,300, which is where it's at now. Let me just check it absolutely. To the moment, it's at 1,303, which is interesting. That is a multi-month high. It hasn't been at that level since June of last year. It seems to me it's building a cup and handle, Google it, which means that it could yet come back to maybe, well, it would, if it came back to the 1260s and then went back up to 1,300, that would be the handle of the cup. Look at a cup and handle, it looks like a teacup. That would be uber bullish. But yeah, we've got the golden cross. It seems to me that gold is in a mega bull market. I said last week that the pound above 28 and it's looking hot. Well, you know what? And I then said above 131, it's hugely hot. Well, it's above 131. It's 132. It ties into a weakening US dollar story. The dollar stands at 95.5, 96, below 96, and it's short-term bearish. The 200-day moving average stands at, let me just see it. I'll just pull up the chart. The 200-day, I pulled up the wrong chart. The 200-day stands at 95.2. I'm telling you, it's so close. Breaching the 200-day, and the dollar is in a mega bear market, and this will be absolutely huge for gold and other commodities. I've just got time to do some quotes and sayings. Do you know, I've been analysing a great deal the question, is breakfast really the most important meal of the day? And as a public service, I think this is really important. I want my listeners to be healthy. So I've done major research into nutrition, demographics, longevity, age longevity, mortality, morbidity, right across the world. So in answer to the question, is breakfast really the most important meal of the day? Well, there's no question. My conclusion is it's definitely in the top 10. Can I just point out that some people have been listening to old Booms and Busts podcasts, and indeed if you want to, they're all there on Audio Boom. Go and have a listen. I've been accused of plagiarism, listener. Can you believe it? Their words, not mine. The great Aristotle lived between 384 and 322 BC. So, he had 61, 62 years. And he said some amazing things. Again, unworldly genius. The more you know you don't know. In markets, that is so true. I forgot to mention, on the 21st of January, 1950, the iconic English novelist and essayist, and of course one of my absolute heroes, journalist and critic Eric Blair died. Who? He's better known as George Orwell. He said, if liberty means anything at all, it must mean the right to tell people what they do not want to hear. He also said, if you want a picture of the future, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever. And now I quote Joseph Stalin. Divide the world into regional groups as a transitional stage to world government. Populations will more readily abandon their national loyalty to a vague regional loyalty than they will for a world authority. Later, the regions can be brought together all the way into a single world dictatorship. Don't tell me that's not where we're heading, because it's abundantly obvious. On that note, listener, I'll see you again. Bye all.